I was once called a flag-waving, Jew-loving Uncle Tom.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. I was listening to Emmy, and I kind of expected him to tee off on the media and accuse them of being fair and even as it comes to Israel. Instead, he said a lot of things that I agree with. I kind of feel like David Duke when David Duke and Al Sharpton and Benjamin Netanyahu were walking down the beach. They saw a magic lantern. They picked it up. They rubbed it. Genie comes out. Gentlemen, one wish. What would you like? Al Sharpton said, I'd like every black man, every black woman, every black child to leave this racist country and return to our ancestral homeland, the great continent of Africa. Benjamin Netanyahu said, I'd like to see every Jew leave America and return to their ancestral homeland, the great state of Israel. David Duke went, I'll have a small Coke. I thought the evidence for the proposition that the media are biased, in particular against Israel, and biased in general against conservatives was overwhelming. I haven't seen this kind of evidence of guilt since the O.J. Simpson case, where O.J. Simpson butchered Ron and Nicole and did everything but leave his business card and blame it on the racist LAPD. First of all, just look at what they say themselves. I once interviewed Walter Cronkite, called the most trusted man in America. And the interview was going along fine. I asked him whether or not the media were liberal. He said, well, if you mean by liberal, open-minded, yes. And I said, well, do you think that you were engaging as a journalist or as a commentator when, in 1968, after the Tet Offensive, you publicly said, we're losing in this war? And Lyndon Johnson said, if we've lost Walter, we've lost the war. Do you think that you were operating as an objective journalist when you made that commentary? He ended the interview and essentially hung up on me. Peter Jennings, the longtime anchor at ABC News, once said that the media are liberal. Andy Rooney, the longtime commentator on CBS who worked with Dan Rather for decades, publicly said that Dan Rather was transparently liberal and he should do a better job of it. The former executive editor of the New York Times said, of course we have a liberal progressive philosophy that more or less believes the kinds of things that left-wing people do. This is what our paper is, this is what we do. A rare, candid admission of bias. The current executive editor of the New York Times is a man named Dean Baquet. The New York Times recently hired a new columnist named Bret Stephens, who used to write for the Wall Street Journal. His first column had to do with his skepticism about climate change. Because of that first column, the New York Times got a whole bunch of phone calls from people canceling their subscriptions, and Dan Baquet had to defend the decision to hire this man. And he said, I've come to the conclusion, quote, as a general rule, the left does not want to hear thoughtful disagreement, end of quote.
In June alone, consumer prices soared 5.4%. In May, it was 5%. These are the highest bumps since 2008. Higher fuel prices, higher food prices, construction costs, housing prices. Inflation isn't just coming, it's here. Have you protected your savings, your investments, if they're tied to the dollar in stocks, bonds, or cash? Well, the answer is no. You see, Birch Gold Group offers you an opportunity to hedge against inflation by diversifying a portion of your savings into physical precious metals. In fact, with a little-known IRS loophole, you can even convert your IRA or eligible 401k into an IRA backed by gold and silver. That's right. With this simple move, you can convert your existing retirement savings that are tied to the stock market into an IRA with physical precious metals. It's your hedge against inflation. So contact Birch Gold Group to request a free info kit on physical precious metals. See if diversifying into gold makes sense for you. This comprehensive 20-page kit reveals how gold and silver can protect your savings and how you can legally move your IRA or 401k out of risky stocks and bonds into a precious metals IRA. Birch Gold Group has thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, and an A+ rating with the BBB. To get your no-cost, No obligation kit. Just text Larry to 474747. And for a limited time, see how you can qualify for up to $10,000 in free precious metals on your purchase. That's Larry to 474747.
Washington Post was honest enough to do an analysis of their campaign coverage, 2008 Barack Obama versus John McCain. The ombudsperson for the Washington Post, Deborah Howell, wrote 2 pieces. And she said, on the front page of our newspaper, there were more pictures of Barack Obama than John McCain, more flattering pictures of Barack Obama than John McCain, more articles about Barack Obama than John McCain. And it so incensed one of the editors of the Washington Post. He said, we're not garment cutters here. We're putting out a paper that people want to buy. And Barack Obama is a far more interesting person than John McCain. Truth in advertising. You're admitting that you're putting out a product in order to make a buck. Nothing wrong with that. I'm a capitalist. But please, don't give me this all the news that's fit to print. Don't give me this fair and balanced. You're not. These are admissions that they've made. And then, of course, there are the data. A number of books have documented left-wing bias in the media against, you name the issue, whether it's race-based preferences, they're down with it. Whether it's the climate change alarmism, they're down with it. Whether it's the assertion that Israel is the aggressor, they're down with that. You name the left-wing issue, and that's what they believe. There is a wonderful book called Left Turn, written by a friend of mine named Tim Grosclose, who's a professor of politics and of economics at George Mason University, used to work for UCLA, which is where he wrote the book. He analyzed the top 20 sources of news. Of the top 20 sources, 18 were to the left. Only 2 were to the right, and that was the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal and the Fox Evening News with Bret Stephens. Outside of that, ABC, NBC, CBS, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, you name it, they're left-wing. And 80 to 90% of people get their primary news source from one of those left-wing sources. So if you are watching CNN, if you are reading the LA Times, if you're reading the Chicago Tribune, if you're watching MSNBC, you are ill-informed. And that ignorance can take all sorts of bizarre turns. When I came home from school once, a very close friend of mine had changed his name to Abdul. He changed his name because he wanted to renounce the racist name he had before and the racist religion of Christianity. I informed him that Arab slavers took more blacks out of Africa and took them to South Africa and to the Middle East than did European slavers. They did it hundreds of years earlier and continued doing it well after the Europeans stopped. He was unaware of that. I told him that Israel airlifted 16,000 Jews out of Ethiopia in the mid-'80s and the early '90s. He was unaware of that. I told him that the man who helped to found the Tuskegee Institute, Mr. Rosenwald, a Jew, had went on to help Booker T. Washington found some 5,000 schools, mostly in the South. He was unaware of that. Have you seen the movie Mississippi Burning? He said, yes. Are you aware that of the 3 young men who died, Messrs. Cheney and Schwerner and Goodman, 2 of the 3 were Jewish? Unaware. Are you aware that of the non-blacks who went down in the South in the 60s to register people to vote, 75% of them were Jewish? Unaware of that. I have a friend who one time was talking about how dominant she thought the Jews were. And I said, what percentage of the world do you believe is Jewish? She said, no idea. Ballpark it. No idea. Give me a guess. She said, 25%. I said, are you kidding me? She said, no, about 20. Do you think 1 in 4 persons on the face of the earth is Jewish? She said, yes. I said, how about 0.2%? She said, oh my goodness, 0.2? I said, you didn't listen. 0.2%. 7 billion people in the world, 14 million Jews, do the math. 0.2%. of 1%. She said she had no idea. How can you have no idea? Too much CNN, too little Larry Elder. One of the reasons for the skewed perspective is because the media never puts things in context. Israel is a tiny country. I visited Israel when I was 21 years old. I had my birthday in Israel. That's kind of spiritual. Tiny country. It is 1/50th the size of America. So, when a terrorist kills 4 Israelis, that's how it's reported. It's never translated to terms we can understand. Las Vegas, we lost over 50 people. In Orlando, we lost over 30 people. 4 people multiplied times 50 is 200. For us to get some sort of perspective, it's as if you picked up a newspaper and read that 200 Americans had been blown up in a terror attack. Do you think maybe there had been some conversation about that? I think so. But you pick up the newspaper, 2 Jews were killed. If you pick up the newspaper and you read that 100 Americans were killed, oh my goodness, what happened? Total and complete lack of perspective, and that's on the media. I am told not to speak too long. We're going to have Q&A, but I like to just the ignorance is one of the reasons why we have the degree of anti-Semitism that we have in this country. I gave a speech before the ADL once, and before I spoke, they went over the results of a poll they commissioned and said, good news, anti-Semitism in America is at an all-time low, 12%. And I said, well, don't expect that number to go down much further. 10% believe that Elvis is still alive, and 8% of Americans believe that if you send him a letter, he will get it. I'm not making this up. 36%, however, of blacks are perceived to be anti-Semitic. And it is largely because of the media, because of people like Jesse Jackson, who once referred to New York as Town and Jews as Jaime, and Al Sharpton, who once was involved in the Crown Heights riots, denied his involvement, a tape surfaced showing him challenging the Jews to pin their yarmulkes and come over to my house and get it on. And you have Minister Farrakhan, of course, who's one of the leading anti-Semites in this country, all of whom have had a perversive effect on how blacks perceive what's going on in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I want to end by saying, I believe it was right in this ballroom when I was asked to participate in an affair honoring the State of Israel. Frank McCourt, the then owner of the Dodgers, and his wife were big contributors to Israel. I was invited. I was sitting in the back. At my table was a publicist named Warren Cowan, probably the greatest publicist ever. And I heard that Sandy Koufax was sitting at the table in the front. I've always admired Sandy Koufax, my hero when I was growing up. And I said to Warren, is there any way you could maybe go down there and perhaps have me get a chance to meet Sandy? I'll be right back. He walks down. He comes back about 5 minutes later. Follow me. We walk down the hall. Sandy Koufax stands up, tuxedo on, black tie affair. He looked magnificent. I said, Sandy, I am such a fan. You know, he told you that I'm a talk show host, but what I always wanted to be was a writer. And the first thing I ever wrote was about you, and it got published. And I was in the 6th grade manual. He goes, really? I said, yeah, I wrote a poem about you. Let me give you the first stanza. It was, Koufax is on the mound. The game has just begun. He gets a sign from the catcher, and swish, strike one. And Sandy leaned over and said, don't quit your day job. Thank you very much for having me. May God bless you. May God continue to bless the great state of Israel.
Now, at the beginning of this video, I told you I was once called a flag-waving, Jew-loving Uncle Tom. I copped a 2 out of 3. May God continue to bless America, and may God continue to bless the great state of Israel. I'm Larry Elder, and we've got a country to save. Out.